Hi everyone, Amber here from Majestic. Welcome back to my channel. Today is another sewing marathon hosted by the Marathon Society. And today we are not sewing up just one pattern. We are doing a back to school special. So all of us have chosen different patterns that highlight things that you can use for back to school. I don't want to be thinking about back to school. I'm a teacher and I'm going to have to be back in the classroom soon. But I enjoyed sewing up my project so much. I sewed up the Divide and Go. This is by Studio 77. So thank you so much, Emma, for allowing me to film your pattern. I reached out to her. I saw this. I thought it would be so perfect for back to class. So it features on the long side a slip pocket here, and it does expand. So on both long sides, there are the slip pockets. And then on both short pockets, there are a zipper and it has a mesh bottom. So that is on both short sides. It features a carrying handle, and the coolest part, it is divided. And it uses hook and loop so you can move these dividers around so as you see fit. So if you needed like a bigger pocket, Emma also mentions that it carries 6 cups of coffee perfectly. Would be great for those professional development days. But I think this is going to be so useful. I can divide it. I could put like markers, crayons, colored pencils. In my class, we have to transition students to the next room. So if they have items that kind of need to go along with them, it could be a great carrier. And when I was showing my mom, she does card making, and she was like, oh, that would be great for card making. So it does have multi-uses, not just for back to school. Sticking with that theme, I did use cotton woven, school print from K&A Custom Fabrics on the exterior. And for the lining, the dividers, and the bottom, I used a combination of waterproof canvas and water-resistant canvas. Emma does classify this as an intermediate pattern, and I definitely agree. It can get a little thick in the corners, so you really want to be mindful of your materials. She does not recommend using vinyl or cork when making this, and I definitely agree with her, especially if you are sewing on a domestic. So again, Emma does film tutorials for all her patterns, so I will have all her information in the description, as well as a link to this video. She has a cool bag making club. She has all sorts of stuff that she does, and she has a really incredible past career with costume making. So definitely check out her website and all her social medias. I hope you're enjoying the marathon, and I hope you do try to make the Divide and Go tote. Let me know in the comments if you do. If you like the video, I would love if you give it a thumbs up or subscribe. It does help my channel grow. I appreciate it so much, and I hope you enjoy. All right, so I have all my pieces laid out. I'm using a variety of materials. For a lot of it, I am using a cotton woven. This print, I believe I got from K&A Fabrics, and I have interfaced it with cotton firm from Wizardry Stitchery. So it's like a much firmer SF 101. A lot of the lining, such as for like the dividers, I am using a water resistant canvas. This is from Mormino, so it has like the sprayed coating. It does not have the PVC backing. For anything that's said to use some Decoville heavy, for example, this is our long side panel. And Emma includes all these little tags, which I highly recommend because you have a lot of pieces. I have used from Wallwack their Profuse Stiff. Emma also gives a lot of suggestions for interfacing, so it's kind of like what works best for you. I also have the by Annie's Mess I'm using for the bottom pocket, pieces for the zipper top. Now, my base, I am using a waterproof canvas. This does have the PVC backing. This is the Pro Tough from Walmart, and I had some self-adhesive. It's not really foam. It almost reminds me of, it's like a flannel feel, but it's kind of thick, and I'm hoping it gives like a really good base, but still enough that I could turn it. So I chose that instead of the Decoville Heavy. And the same thing for the divider pieces. These are the ones that are going to go into the short panels that we interface later on. I also chose this self-adhesive. You can see kind of how thick it is. I think this is going to give a really good sturdiness for like the separate dividers. So this is now as far as notions. I have 2 pieces of zipper tape. I have 2 zipper pulls. I have some double fold bias tape. I have some hook and loop fastener here. It's a little bit wider than what is recommended, so I'm going to try to cut it in half. I think that will work without any trouble. And then I have 2 pieces of seatbelt webbing cut to the measurement given in the project. All right, and as far as supplies, I have plenty of clips. I am sewing with this Tex 35 thread from Wizardry Stitchery. I'm using a 9014 Microtex needle. I have a pair of snips, a seam ripper stiletto combo, a chalk pen, a silver marking pen, a blue water-soluble pen, a lighter, and some double-sided tape. All right, so our first step, we are going to make the middle divider sections. So for step 2, we're using the short divider, which is pattern piece 7. And for step 3, we are using the long divider, which is pattern piece 6. And the process is the same in terms of how we sew them, not how we mark them later on. So I'm going to do all 3 at once. So starting with our short divider, we want to fold them right sides together, and we are going to sew around the 3 raw edges, leaving a turning hole up here. All right, so this is our pattern piece 6. Make sure you're turning it so your long sides are left to right. I originally accidentally folded it the wrong way. So we need to fold this along the short end so we have one long piece. And we're also going to sew this all 3 sides, leaving a turning hole open in the top. Great, so I'm going to bring this piece and the other 2 short sides. I had to redo this one, so that's why you don't see them right now. And sew along the short side, along the top, leaving our turning hole, and then coming back down and going along all 3 sides at the seam allowance given in the pattern. Great, so I have just finished sewing all 3 and left my turning hole. So now what you want to do is on the corners, if you just trim them down at an angle, it's going to make it so when you turn this, they sit a lot nicer. You don't want to cut into your seam allowance, so be very, very mindful of that. For us. And I just grabbed a chopstick. This is literally from like takeout. And I use that to poke out all my corners. Alright, so we're not closing our hole up yet. So I'm gonna try these 2 off camera and then come back for the next instructions. Alright, so I have my pattern pieces marked. I have my 2 short and my 1 long. I still have all my turning holes in the bottom. I have marked out using the measurements given. I had this metal, like it's Dritz easy hem. So basically you could do like a hot hem. On this side, it had metric. So I used that to really make sure my lines were accurate. So now in this step, this is where you're going to be inserting the Decoville light inside. I have these foam, so that's what I'm going to use. I'm going to trim it because it is thicker, I think I'm going to have to trim it down a tiny bit. So let's try this. So if you just have the Decoville, you are going to just fold it, insert it between the lines, and make sure it is behind your seam allowance, because when you press it, you want to make sure that it's catching the fabric and not your seam allowance that's folded. So you want to make sure that when you put it, it's behind that. We're going to see how this goes, because this is also sticky. So I don't know if this is going to give me trouble, but I'm going to try, because these are pretty sturdy and I think they're going to make great dividers. And you can see from this side that it comes right up to that center line, which is okay, because there should be a little gap between. And if I'm pressing this down, you can see it goes right up to there. All right, I'm going to trim this one a tiny bit. If I was using Decoville, I wouldn't have to trim it. It's because of the thickness. I almost wonder if it's easier if I peel it after it's inside. So if you're using the Decoville, once you have it in and you can see that there is a gap between the two, you want a gap so that this can fold. So once you have your Decoville where you want it, you are going to take it and press it. That way it is stuck in place. Because I'm using the sticky ones, I do not need to press it. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other short side. And then we're going to have to stitch up our bottom. For this long one here, we don't have a center line because we're going to need 3 of these. So you can see I'm going to trim them down just a tiny bit because they're thicker. I guess I measured them a little bit too big. So I'm going to trim them so we can fit 3. You'll have the 3 Decoville with a little space between them. And then I'll come back once I have all of these inside of my pockets. All right, I have just put in all the Decoville inside of my pieces, or in my case, I'm using that fusible or self-sticky foam. So if you're using the Decoville, you want them to be in, you want them to have a little gap. They should be able to bend, but you still want them snug, and you should have pressed them so that they are adhered. Since mine are the self-stick, I don't need to press them. Now our next step is we are going to make sure that our seam allowance is tucked down in, and your Decoville should be behind that seam allowance. It shouldn't be a problem, but just be very mindful. And now we're going to bring this to the machine and we're going to top stitch along the top and the bottom, making sure that you're closing up these turning holes as you're doing it. So you should have a top stitch along the top and the bottom. Alright, so I have just top stitched along the top and the bottom of the long and short divider. Our next step is we are going to add our hook and loop, and that is basically like a Velcro. Can't call it that though because it's trademarked. So if you see hook and loop, that's what it is talking about. And we are going to put it along the sides here where those measurements are, which our interfacing should not be, because when we put in the Decoville, or in my case the self-adhesive, it's up to each of these lines. So I actually only had 3/4 inch hook and loop, so I just trimmed them in half and it seems to work perfectly. So we are going to sew the softer side, so the fuzzier side, on each of our edges. And you could probably pin it in place. I'm just going to try putting a small piece of double-sided tape. This one I just got from the Dollar Tree, so it's not super sticky. So it doesn't normally give my sewing machine problems, like as far as gumming up the needle, as long as I'm not using a ton. So again, that is the softer side, and I'm just going to center it. I did have to trim it down a tiny bit. I think it's just because my seam allowances wobble a tiny bit. So I am going to stick them on for each of these short sides. Again, you want the softer side, and I'm going to take it to the machine and just stitch all the way around in a box, holding this into place for each side. So I have just finished up sewing the hook and loop onto the small and the large side. I probably should have used a thread that blends in, but I don't mind because these are going to be like bent and connected. You're not really going to see it, but if that's important to you, you might want to have it blend. I also think it's good for the video because you can actually see where I have stitched. So again, this is the soft side on our divider pieces. So now we're going to have to put that scratchier side on, and we're going to need our pattern pieces 3 and 2. So I'm going to grab them and then come back. All right, so I have grabbed my lining long side panels and my lining short side. I chose to use the exterior pieces for this lining short side, so that's why you see the print. You might have the same. I wanted to switch it up a little bit. So on our pattern piece 2 and our pattern piece 3, there are red boxes. So I just transferred the center line onto each of these. You could also do the box. It was just easier for me to draw the line. And I also want to note on the short side pieces, these are not in the center. So if it looks a little off, that's why. It is correct. You do not want it in the center. Make sure you're being very mindful of that. And the lining long side have 2 marks. The short side has 1. So now we're going to attach our other side of the hook and loop in the same exact manner, except we are centering these on the line. Or if you drew the box, you could put it exactly where the box is. For me, I'm just centering them. And we want to make sure that it's out of the seam allowance on both the top and the bottom. That's really important. So for each of your short sides, you should have 1. And then for each of your long sides, you should have 2. And we're attaching them in the same exact manner like we did for our dividers. So I'm going to take it to the machine and sew a box, stitching each of these on. All right, so I have just finished attaching the other side of the Velcro to my 2 short side linings and my 2 long side linings. For whatever reason, I think maybe because this is the stiffer, it messed with my tension a little bit, so I really had to play with it. So something to be mindful of. I'm not sure if you'll have trouble with yours, but it didn't give me that problem on the softer side, so I definitely think it just has to do with this scratchier. All right, so now that these are sewed on, I'm going to set these all to the side because we're going to work on our zipper pockets. So I am going to grab my mesh, my double fold bias tape, my zippers, and the zipper pocket top, which I believe is pattern piece 4. So I'm going to grab that and I'll be right back. All right, so I have both my zippers. I switched out one of the purple for pink because I realized that there was a stain on one of my purple. So that's why it looks different. I have my pulls, I have my mesh pieces, I have the zipper pocket, top, and lining, and my double fold bias tape. So now you might want to check this because I'm going to attach this first like it shows in the instructions, but there's an option to attach this when we put it on the zipper. So it really depends. Do you want 1 line of top stitching or 2? I don't mind 2, so I am going to attach this first like the instructions show. But again, if you want to do that differently, you can attach it later. So I'm just opening this up and clipping my mesh inside. And I'm going to sew both at the same time. So basically, I'm just going to clip this and put both of my mesh pieces in. And so once I get them clipped in, I am going to take it to the machine and I am just going to top stitch down along this bottom edge here, about a 1/8 inch away from the edge. I want to make sure that I'm catching the back side of my double fold bias tape, and also that the mesh is securely in. And I'm going to use a longer top stitch length as well. All right, so I have just top stitched this on. I back stitched at the end of this one and the beginning of my next mesh pocket. I'm just going to cut this in half so that way they're ready to go when I need them. Okay, and so I'm just going to set them to the side for now because we are going to work on our zipper pockets. So if you have directional fabric, you want to be mindful of that. So I'm just looking real quick, making sure that I have them going right side facing up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with both of my linings right side facing up. It's just a little, this way is a little tiny bit different than how Emma has it. This way is just easier for me. So you could follow what I'm doing here, or you could do it as the pattern shows. There's no difference. It's just that my brain, because my print is directional, works easier for me to do it this way. I'm also not adding my pull on yet. If you add it on when you are clipping these, you definitely want to move it while you're clipping and while you're sewing. So with my lining right side facing up, I'm going to put my zipper tape, line up the top. If you cut it to size, you're going to line up to edge. I always leave mine with a little bit of overhang so I can trim them later. So that's why mine has that overhang. Okay. And so now you can either baste these on, or if you wanted to put a piece of double-sided tape to hold them, you could. Now, the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to put your exterior right side facing down. Well, this is going to be above our zipper, so eventually this is going to open like this, and this is going to be above it. So I want to make sure I'm putting mine right side facing down, and I have it right side, like the directional is towards me, and then I'm folding it down towards me. So that way when I open it, it's going the correct way. And that's why I'm putting my zipper on this way, just because I can see it this way better, and it works better for my brain. So now I'm just going to clip these on, making sure that I'm lining them up if your zipper is overhanging, or lining them up with the edge. And then once you have it clipped, I'm going to take this to the machine, and I am going to stitch at the given seam allowance across the top. And I'm going to repeat that for this other zipper over here and do both at once. All right, so I have just stitched at the given seam allowance along both of these. I'm just gonna cut off the zipper tail to make it more manageable. And then now we are folding the lining and the exterior wrong sides together. So you want to fold and pull them away from your zipper. So that's what I am doing here. And I always just kind of flip them over and make sure I'm really pulling away, because sometimes with the water resistant canvas, it wants to stay pointing down. So I'm going to do this for both. And then I am going to take them to the machine, and I'm going to top stitch across the zipper, but I'm going to continue it and just sew all around. So that way all four sides are sewn together, just makes it more manageable as a piece. So I'm going to do the same thing over here, so that way I can top stitch this one as well. All right, so I have just top stitched both my zippers. I'm still not going to put the zipper pull on yet, because I'm going to attach my mesh first. And so how we're going to do this is I'm going to put some double-sided tape along the bottom here. And I'm really hoping it doesn't gum up my needle. So I can just use some alcohol, like an alcohol white to take off the stickiness. There we go. Now we're going to add our mesh pocket. So I am putting it vertical so I can kind of just line it up. You can also measure. There's a measurement given in the pattern, but I want to make sure mine is kind of the same distance away as that top piece. So I want this to be kind of even, or mostly even, which I think it's pretty darn close. And so now I am going to take that to the machine and I'm going to top stitch along the top. So this is the part here where if you did not want to add this already, you could do it both at the same time, but I think it's close enough that the double row of stitching, far enough away with a 1/2 inch that double row is going to look fine. So I'm going to do the same thing for this other zipper, attach it on, and bring it and top stitch both of my mesh pieces to my zipper. All right, so I have just attached on the mesh pocket. It looks great. If you have a lot of double-sided tape sticking out, try to peel it off. There's not that much, so it's not really that sticky on mine, so I'm not too worried about it. But if it is hanging down a lot, you definitely don't want it there because you'll feel it when you put stuff in the pocket. Okay, so now I have not put my zipper pull on yet. So now I'm going to do that. I have this cute little school bus pull. These are exclusive to our shop. So they are available in all the different finishes. And I just put my right side on first, like a couple teeth, and then put the left in. Usually it balances pretty straight, and then I can push on and they'll come through. It does look like there's a little bit of a bubble there. I'm like a perfectionist, so that bubble will come out, especially on this other side. But if you get that, you can just try again. What happened is it means that my teeth, it wasn't so straight on this end. All right, there's still a little bubble, but it's fine. It will come out over here because I have the extra zipper tape. It's not a problem. And I'm going to do the same thing for this side. So, all right, so once you have these on, now what you're going to do is we need our pattern piece 2. These are our short side pockets. I had used the same print that I had already put over here with the Velcro. The only difference is this should have your Decoville light, or in my case, I have the Profuse stiff on the back. And you are going to line it up. So I'm just going to align my top piece here, and then the rest should all fall into order. You can see my zipper tape overhangs a little bit. That's perfectly fine. I'm going to trim that at the end, and the mesh, everything pretty much lines up almost perfectly. And I'm going to do the same thing for this one over here. All right, so now I'm going to bring this to the machine and just base stitch around all 4 sides, so that way this is holding our mesh and our top piece to that back lining piece. Great, so I have just finished stitching around, so this is great. And you can see I zipped this all the way to the end and the bubble came out. So if you have that bubble, don't worry too much. I really love how this looks. I'm glad that I chose like an exterior fabric so you can see the print popping through. So I'm going to set these to the side. We're now going to need our long side panel, which I believe is pattern piece 3. So I'm going to grab them and put the marks on, as well as grab my handles. All right, so I have grabbed my 2 long exterior panels. I have marked in chalk my lines, and I have my webbing. So I am going to line up the bottom of my webbing with the bottom of my fabric and the inside edge of the webbing with that line that I drew. And I was going to use double-sided tape, but it wasn't sticking to the fabric. So I'm just going to clip these into place and I'll help hold them when I get to the machine. And so now you want to loop this around. Make sure your webbing is not twisted. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble later on. So double check, and then we're going to do the same thing. Line up the bottom with the bottom and then the inside edge of your webbing against that line that you drew. And I'm using chalk for all of these because it erases really well. Wipes off with towel or water. So now we're going to bring this to the machine and we are going to stitch a box. There's a measurement from the top that you want to leave a gap so you don't want to sew all the way up to this top edge of the strap. Make sure you're stopping and cutting across at that given measurement. You could draw a chalk line or something to help remind you. And then we're going to do the same thing for the other side. Alright, so I have just stitched on my 2 straps. If you want to add an extra row of top stitching or put some rivets to help hold them, I just made sure I backstitched really well at the bottom. It's not a huge bag, so I think it'll be fine. I'm not really too worried about them pulling away. So I'm going to set them to the side. And now we need our pattern piece 8, our long slip pocket. So we have 2. We are going to be folding them in half, wrong sides together. So I know that I did choose a directional print, but we are going to be making pleats in this, and the slip pocket, you're not even really going to see the back. So I didn't worry about it too much, and I really wanted this to show as the exterior. So that's why I chose the directional. You could also, if you really wanted to, I guess, cut this in 2, add your, like when you're cutting it out, add a seam allowance and do like a lining and an exterior piece. But I'm okay with this. I'm gonna do the same thing on this one. And we are going to take these to the machine and we're going to top stitch along the folded part. So I'm just clipping along the bottom just to help hold this in place. I used Cotton Firm, which is a interfacing from Wizardry Stitchery, and it does sorry about that. It does give it some firmness, and it creases really nicely. So now I'm going to bring this to the machine and just top stitch along the top here and along the top here of these long slip pockets. Alright, so I have just taken these both and top stitched across the top. I have also used chalk to match my center line, or create my center line, I should say. And I have done that for both of the pockets. I have also found my center of each of my pieces that have the handles. And that's because we are going to match up our centers, and the pocket does not go all the way to the top. So I'm just using that line to make sure I line it up on the bottom and the top. And I'm going to clip this into place. And we are going to stitch this at the machine. I'm going to start at the bottom, backstitch really well, come all the way up to the top and backstitch really well. Because this is going to be a pocket that a slip pocket that expands out. So we want to make sure that it's strong there. You could also do like a box and put a rivet if you want. But I'm just going to do the top stitching with the back stitching at the bottom and the top. And I'm going to do that for both pieces with the handles and the long pockets. Alright, so I have top stitched down the center, making sure I backstitch really well at the top and the bottoms. And I've done that for both sides. So now we need to draw 2 lines. There's a measurement given in the pattern, and you measure it from this center line here. So it's so much to the right and so much to the left. It ends up a little bit, not quite center on the pockets. I mean, on the webbing, if you were using that, but falls within the webbing. So I have done that for both. And what we're going to do now is we are going to fold this on that line. because we are going to create a pocket that can expand to give it a little bit of 3D. So we are going to top stitch on this line. We're going to do the same thing over here. So I'm just folding this so it is the back, like lining side is touching each other and creating this crease. So now I'm going to take this to the machine and I am going to top stitch. You only want to top stitch where you have it folded. So in order to do that, I'm going to fold this out of the way to top stitch down. You don't want to catch this piece that has your handles in the back. So you're going to do that for both of your pieces with the straps. So I am going to crease these off camera and then bring it all and top stitch all at once. So I have just top stitched on the folds. So you can see it kind of looks like two little mountains or tents here. And I've done that for both long panels. So now we need to create the other fold. So basically what's going to happen is this is going to fold here and we're going to have another one and it's going to create so we can expand this pocket. So once you have these top stitched, there is another measurement. You're going to measure in from each of these short sides and mark your vertical line, just like what we did for the last one. And again, I'm just pinching that so I know exactly where to sew. So that now you can see a little bit better. We'll eventually be matching up our short sides. This will come down and it creates that little expandable pocket here. So that's what we're working on. And so I'm going to do the same thing for this side here. And I'm using the same thread for my bottom stitch and my top stitch. So it doesn't really matter, but you want to make sure. So when this gets folded down here, this side is going to be the showing, and on the left, it's going to be this side here. So if that does matter, if you're using different thread, you do want to be mindful of that. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I have it marked out here on this other panel. Clip them. I'm going to bring them to the machine. I'm going to top stitch them again, and then we're almost done with our outside pockets. Right, so I've just finished up both of my top stitching lines. So now what you're going to do is you're going to line up your short edge of the pocket with the short edge of the panel behind it. And I'm going to do that for both sides. There's an optional step. So if you do not want your pockets to gape open so far, I'm going to show you something that you can do. Okay, so since we have the short ends clipped, you should be able to kind of just press this down and you'll see it pretty much centers itself right where the webbing is. And same thing on this side. So if you don't want these pockets to kind of bow out, there's an optional step where you could bend back this panel and sew only through your pocket right here, these layers, to kind of keep it in place. I like the idea that my pocket can open really far, and this is not like a huge pocket, so it's not like it's going to bow out and things are going to fall out. So I'm not going to do that top stitching here to hold this in place. I want it to be able to fully expand. So what we're going to do, if you don't want to do that top stitching, you're going to do that first if you want to, and then if you don't want to, this is the next step. Well, I just broke my clip. Clipping this all down because we are going to base around all three sides. So since the short sides are already clipped, this should just, when you push down on it hard enough, it should just naturally press and create that fold. All right, perfect. And because of my interfacing, it's a little bit sick. I'm just going to go slow on my machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to base stitch. So you want to stitch within your seam allowance, down the short side, all the way across the bottom, and then back up here. I'm back stitching at the beginning and the end, and that's going to create our open pocket. So again, right, so I have just base stitched around all three sides. So we have our pockets. I love how they look. I like that they open up wide for me, especially because it's not like a super long piece, so it's not going to have stuff fall out. So our next step is to attach our zipper pocket sides. And you can see here, I've already attached one. And that's because I attached them separately, so I did it wrong. So we're going to take one of our zipper pockets and clip it so the left side is aligned. Make sure that your zipper is facing the right way. The mesh is on the bottom. And you're going to clip it to the left side, right side facing down. And we're going to sew it at the given seam allowance. And if you want to do the other side at the same exact time, you can put this right side facing down and clip it on the right hand side. And so this is where I made a mistake. I accidentally sewed it to the right hand side of the opposite long exterior piece, but it's the same one. We're going to attach that part later. So basically you have both of your zipper pockets right side facing down, one aligned on the left, one aligned on the right, and we're going to sew at the given seam allowance. So now that I have both sides stitched, if I were to open them up, this is what it looks like. Now we need to attach our other pocket. So we're going to do the same exact thing. It can help if you have this right side facing up. So I'm going to take my pocket, line up the right hand side, or I should say my short piece or short side with the zipper, lining up the right hand side, and then doing the same thing, my other zipper lining up the short side on the left. So basically you can see that once we sew this, it's going to form that rectangle carrier. Okay, so I'm going to take this in the machine and stitch down both sides at the regular seam allowance, making sure I'm using the correct stitch length. Great, so I have just added my second long side. So I have my rectangle here. So now we need to add the base. So I'm going to flip this upside down, makes it easier. I have my base here. And she tells you to start and stop at a certain distance from the edge. So basically it's the seam allowance. So basically I drew a box in every corner. That is the seam allowance. So I know when I'm stitching where to start and where to end. And it should line up with this. So there shouldn't be any trouble. So those boxes are what's going to help me. If you want to line up centers, I probably should do that. That would probably be easiest. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up that center here. And I'm going to start with my long edges. And I'm just clipping them right sides together. So the right side of my base to the right side of this panel. And some people sew opposite at the same time. I'm not going to do that just because I don't want things to shift. So I'm just going to show you one side at a time. So basically, if I turn it this way, you can see where I'm clipping them right sides together. And you can see where I have the little box. So basically, I'm going to bring this to my machine and smush this down. And I'm going to put my needle in right where that box starts. Sew all the way down, ending where that box is right here. And that's just the measurement away given in the pattern. Drawing those little squares is just going to help me. So I'm going to do one side at a time. So I'm going to bring this to the machine and I'm going to sew this long side. Make sure you backstitch at the beginning and the end. All right, so I have just stitched across. You might have noticed that I stitched from this side. That's because this is PVC and it really sticks to my machine and I have to use a Teflon foot. So I sewed from this top side and I knew where to stop because I just used my seam allowance right here, this vertical line and this vertical line. that's where I knew to start and stop, because the seam allowance is the given measurement where we are beginning and ending. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the opposite side. And so now I'm going to bring it to the machine and do the same exact thing for this long side here. All right, so I have just sewed up the second side. On this side, I did find it easier to sew with the base side up and just switch to a Teflon foot. So now we have to sew our short sides, and they should just line up almost perfectly. When you kind of tug them, if you need to find the centers, you could find the center. But honestly, like, they should just really fit nice. And what you're going to do is you're going to put your needle in, same thing, like that corner here, come down and stop where that stitch is here. So I have the boxes drawn, but I can also use my stitch lines as my endpoints. And I'm going to clip and sew both of these at the same time, just to save myself time. So same thing, I'm going to bring this to the machine, starting and stopping at those stitch lines, which will create a perfect corner. Alright, so I have just sewed along the short sides. My seam allowance like wobbled a little bit, but honestly, these are usually forgiving. It's just because I use kind of thick interfacing with everything, so it was kind of hard to smush this. So definitely just take your time when you get to those edges. And now I'm just lifting the camera up a little bit so that way you can see. I'm going to turn this right side facing out, and this is also good so that way you can tell if you caught your corners like you should. Alright, and so you can just check to make sure that all your corners have poked out, and you can see it's starting to come together. You can see our pockets on the sides. So cute. I'm so happy with it. So now I'm going to grab the lining pieces. Alright, so I have my lining base, my 2 lining short sides, and my 2 lining long sides. I am going to start with the short sides, and I am going to put them right side facing down. I chose prints that are directional, so I'm making sure that I am putting them on the correct way. So that way when it's open, they will be facing the correct direction. So we're going to do the same way that we sewed our exterior. We're going to do the same for our lining. I am going to mark where the start and stop on the back here, because I don't have any seam allowances to go by already. Okay, so I'm going to start and stop that distance away. So at the regular seam allowance, on the smaller stitch length, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Alright, so I have just stitched, you can see where I marked the line. And so now we are going to fold these open. And I'm not ironing or anything, I'm just pressing my seams open. It doesn't give a direction, I'm just pressing them towards the outside. Alright, and so now we have our long side pieces, lining pieces. And I am going to put that face down, right sides together. So I'm going to put that right side down, matching those centers. That way, making sure I'm doing everything correctly. And I'm just clipping all the way across. And again, I'm going to draw my measurement on the end, starting and stopping from that measurement point. Basically, it's going to be starting and stopping where it is attached to our side our side panel there. All right, and before you sew the long edges on, you can see that I already did it, but I forgot to mention it. So make sure you leave a turning hole. I left a pretty generous sized one because my interfacing is rather thick. So be very mindful. So when you're stitching one side, you want to start and stop at the given, and make sure you backstitch, leaving that turning opening. All right, so we have just sewed our long edges on. And so now basically we have to sew up our short edges. So what I'm going to do is line up the top and then click down. And I'm going to be using the seam allowance given in the pattern, making sure that you're backstitching at the beginning and the end. All right, so I have just closed up all 4 sides. You can see that, the seam allowance wiggles a little bit for me. If yours ends up happening like that, don't worry about it. What's most important is just checking that your corner looks good. So make sure your corners look okay. I have my turning hole, so that's why you see this gaping open. And so now we need to sew these together. So I have my lining wrong side out, and I have my exterior right side facing out. So I'm going to put my exterior inside my lining. And it's definitely a tight fit. Hoping that I can squish it and make it fit okay. So what I'm doing is I am lining up my corners and I am nesting them. So I'm putting one side of the seam allowance going one way and the other facing the opposite. Again, just really taking my time, making sure that it's all pushed down. Right, and once you get it all the way clipped, you're going to take it to the machine and you're going to stitch all the way around the top at the seam allowance given in the pattern. All right, so I have just finished sewing around the top. You can see that my seam allowance is not perfect. I did put on a zipper foot to kind of help as I was going, try to get as close to that edge as possible. And I think I tried to really feel to make sure I wasn't catching the webbing. So I think it's going to turn out okay. Now our next step is pulling it through our turning hole. All right, so now that I have this turned, I still have my turning hole open, and I like doing that so that way if you reach inside to really help this get a nice crisp edge. So I'm just going to take my time and go around and clip. All right, so now I have that kind of, so it's like training itself. You can push this down, make sure everything fits nicely. You might want to do that before you sew up your turning hole. And I'm just really pushing, making sure that all the interfacing is into those corners. Okay, so now that I have the clips kind of holding it in place, I'm going to close up our turning hole. So I do this in the pattern she recommends hand sewing, but I hate doing that. I'm just going to stitch it, especially because it's going to blend into the seam line anyways. So I just going to tuck my fingers down in and give it a tug. And it really, for the most part, pulls that seam allowance down inside. And so now I'm just going to clip all the way across. And then I'm going to take it to the machine and stitch this closed. And I'm going to stitch it as close to this edge as possible. So probably about 1/8 of an inch away. All right, so I have just stitched that close, and the purple thread blends really well. You can barely notice it. So I'm going to tuck that back in. I'm going to now top stitch this. So I'm going to top stitch it from the inside, and hopefully it looks okay on the outside. The other thing to be mindful of is your handles. You want to make sure that they are down. You don't want to accidentally top stitch through them. So make sure. All right, so I have just finished top stitching. Definitely not like my best top stitch ever. Our last step is to just sew our dividers together and put them into the bucket. Great, so now I have my dividers. I have my long and my 2 short. I am going to put this long divider right side facing down, so with the Velcro facing down. And on the back here, I just transferred my lines. I drew them with chalk. It's the lines that are between your interfacing, like between the decalville that we put in. And so now we're going to take one of our short dividers and line up the center. So you can fold it in half. You can still see I have that chalk line, or I can also feel that is between the dividers. We are going to line that up also with the Velcro or the hook and loop facing down, right side facing down. And I'm just going to clip them into place. And we are going to stitch down this center line here, making sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. You might want to go over it a couple times just to make this extra sturdy. All right, so you can see that I have stitched down. So basically you can see that this is going to open and create one of our dividers. And so now I still have my long side with Velcro facing down. I'm going to fold this short one kind of out of the way. And I'm going to take my next short one and do the same exact thing, lining up our center with the line here on the right hand side. And again, just lining it up. I can feel, because I use a thicker interfacing, where I need to sew. Okay. And again, bringing that to the machine, backstitching really well at the top and the bottom. All right, so I have just sewed on the second one. So you can see if we're looking from above, these are going to open up and create our dividers. It's so cute. So now I'm grabbing my toe, and I'm just going to line these up and Velcro them all on. What's cool is that if you need like a longer or shorter, since these are Velcroed, or latch and hook on, you can, like, for example, like if I needed one like this, I could make it a bigger area, which is going to be so helpful in my classroom. Definitely going to put, I think I'm going to put like markers, pens, colored pencils, a whole bunch of stuff. This is also great. We have to transition our students to different classes, and like this could be something that could be taken from class to class, just making sure that the kids have everything that they need. Yay! All right, so here we go. This is amazing. All right, we have just finished up our divide and go. I hope you love it as much as I do. Thank you, Emma from Studio 77, for allowing me to film a tutorial for your pattern. It is a great pattern. I hope all of you try it. Thank you again to the Marathon Society for allowing me to participate. I always look forward to this and chatting with everybody. Let me know in the comments if you decide to make one, or if you make one, tag me on social media as well as Studio 77. I would absolutely love to see. Again, if you did enjoy the video, please consider subscribing or giving me a thumbs up. It does help my channel grow. I appreciate it so much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.